A little spinny. We're almost there. Okay. And here we go. All right, folks. Hello, fellow hams, CBers, shortwave listeners, and anyone else that may have found our stream. Welcome to you, whether you are in the field, in the shack, or somewhere in between. If you're attending the live stream, we encourage you to drop a question into the chat. If you're watching this as a video post-event and have a question for us, please leave a comment and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. This stream is being broadcast on both my YouTube channel, Outdoors on the Air, and Chris's YouTube channel, Kilo 2 Charlie Juliet Bravo Radio. We don't have a moderator, so we may not get a chance to respond directly to any comments you make during the stream. We'll try our best to get to them all, but if we don't respond directly to your comment, we promise it's nothing personal. Tonight's stream is the latest in our Ham Heroes series. With this series, we profile people who are making a unique and positive contribution to the great hobby of radio. This month, we'd like to welcome our latest ham hero, Gaston Gonzalez. And I apologize, I'm going to try that again. Gaston Gonzalez. Gaston has had a YouTube channel since 2020 named The Tech Prepper. In that short period of time, Gaston's channel has grown to its current level of more than 25,000 subscribers. Gaston's work bridges the gap between the ham radio and prepping communities, and he's really bringing innovation into that space. Before we get into the details of Gaston's effort, let's go around the table and see what the crew has been up to. I'll kick things off here. And one of the things that I did since the last live stream is I pulled out my Yaesu FT897D. Those of you that watched my Great Lakes on the Air, Lake Ontario video may know that my 897D apparently died on me while on the beach there. The tuning dial would not work at all. Everything else seemed to be working fine. The tuning dial was not working. I checked everything. I checked the dial lock. I reset the machine to its factory defaults. Nothing I could think of worked. I was afraid that it was bitten by the bug, which is the dreaded encoder bug, which has plagued some models of the FT897 over its tenure. I finally pulled it out of the bag a couple of weeks ago, hooked it up to a power supply just to do another check of it before arranging service, and it was working fine. I have no idea what the problem was, but
that's like camping.
It's exactly. No, okay, what
are you doing?
Okay. One other thing that is, and Tim's not going to like this at all, but Tim, I got a new antenna, and it's not an N9SAB.
I don't like very much, but this is particularly bad. What's that?
It is something I swore I would never buy. This is one of these low-to-the-ground compromise antennas. It is a Comet HFJ 350M toy box. It is a small telescopic vertical antenna. If you can think of back in the day of CB, they had something called back-of-the-set whips. Sure. I actually had a buddy, a ham radio buddy, VE3OZR, Randy, dear friend of mine. Back in the 80s, he bought one of those realistic HTX 100, I believe it was, the 10-meter rig, and he bought a little CB back of the set antenna, and he had it sitting on his kitchen table. And he wasn't married at the time, and that's why he was able to do that. and he left it turned on, but this was at the height of the solar cycle's maximum. So he was actually able to talk to a guy in Houston from here in southern Ontario on that little wee back of the set antenna. I don't know what kind of success I'm going to have with this, but we're going to find out. Anyway,
Comet makes a nice antenna. I've got a Comet. I've got their.
I got a GP9. Yeah,
I got
VHF, UHF up on the tower.
Like that. It's a 6 meter, 70 centimeter, 2 meter combo.
Ooh, you got one of those.
Yeah, it's pretty big. It's nice. I like it. I've got every antenna. I tell you, I spent more on the antennas than most people spend on radios.
Well, there you go. And you're the antenna guy.
Oh, I got you.
Okay. Enough about me. Let's get to our co-host. Hey, Chris, Kilo 2, Charlie Juliet Bravo. What's been happening in your world?
Well, not a whole lot actually. Ham radio wise, of course, it's holiday season, so I'm pretty busy with all that stuff and in my line of work, my calling. But I did get on. We had a snow. Tracy's going to laugh. We had a snow day here about a week ago, about 6 or 8 inches. So we all just said, "Oh, we're staying home." So I stayed home and brewed up a cup of coffee and came down here and fired up the radio and said, "You know what? I'm just going to tune around, see what's going on." And on 40 meters sideband, I worked Japan.
Wow.
I was like, "Hey, that's pretty cool."
Yeah.
So, and it was interesting the way it worked out. There was a Canadian guy, I forget his call, that was kind of acting as like a net operator for folks that wanted to work this guy in Japan. And he did a great job. He really kept it all under control. And I lucked out. He had a couple of guys that worked the Japan station. And then the VE3 guy was like, "Hey, anybody else want to work him?" And first call, I got in and I called Japan. The signal I was getting from, he gave me a 5.9. I want to say he was like 5.8 here, but think about it. And I was on my off-center fed dipole, right? Unfortunately, it's not one of Tim's dipoles. I got that antenna before I met Tim. So, but it worked. I was pleasantly surprised. I worked Japan 40 meters on an OCF dipole, so that was pretty neat.
Very cool, Chris. Very cool. Hey, Tim, what's happening in your world?
How much power were you using there? Using the whole 100 watts? Chris?
Yeah.
How much power? Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I've
100 watts. Yep.
I've only worked Japan a few times from here. I'm a little bit closer, but no, lately just been keeping up with the Christmas biz and been playing around on JS8 call, believe it or not. It's a mode that I haven't used. I'm trying to determine why I would like it or dislike it better than PSK31. But so far, I'm having a good time with it. And it seems to be more for that weak signal, longer range HF kind of thing. I like it. I'm going to probably do a whole lot more of that in the coming months while I'm snowed in here.
Very cool.
Other than that, business as usual.
All right,
when it comes to snow.
I want to ask you about a couple things here, Tim.
Yeah.
Here is an interesting screen grab from a video you sent me. Well, what's going on in this shot?
Okay, so this fellow is in, I believe he's in Marseille, and he had purchased one of the little 10-meter dipoles, and he had hooked it up to his HT. So he was in, it was either Marseille or Lyon, I can't remember, and he was making these contacts all over Europe using only like a couple of watts. So he took a video of it and he sent it to me, and I loved it. I thought it was great. I wish we could play the whole thing, but I've since talked to him a couple of times, and hopefully we'll do something more in the future.
Nice, fantastic. Your antennas, they just work, Tim. Okay, speaking of that.
Well, you wouldn't think so, but listening to you guys.
Oh, come on. Okay, tell us about this one.
Okay, so remember I told you we were big in Australia. Well,
Yes,
we have a friend down there. His name, all of us, have a friend down there named Gavin, and he was in, it's the Worldwide Flora and Fauna, which is kind of like our POTA, but it's an Australian version of that. And they had a contest, and he won first place in the QRP section using just a 40-meter dipole, which is kind of like a checkbox for me. And I always hoped someone would win a contest or place well in a contest using one of my antennas, and so that happened. 6 watts he was using, 40-meter dipole, made like 120 something contacts, and it wasn't like the competition was tight too. I think the guy who came in second, or the team that came in second, was 119 contacts, I think, and used 120 ish somewhere. So it wasn't like he was out there by himself trying to do it. So my hat's off to these guys. That made me really happy.
Fantastic. Another testament to the quality of your antennas. I'm just fascinated by these strange looking cows they have in Australia.
Yeah, they get up on 2 legs and do this sometimes. There's a couple of cool like TikTok videos where they, the guy gets into a fight with a kangaroo.
All right. Okay, last but certainly not least, Gaston, what's happening in your world over the past few weeks?
Well, it's been pretty busy working on a few projects. First, thanks for having me on, gents. Pleasure to be here. So really 3 things are going on. Finishing up a series I started on YouTube called No Random Contacts, where I basically set out each video with the plan of establishing a targeted contact, whether it's someone in my community, the city, the county, the state, the region. So that's been going pretty well, showing people that it's possible to make things that are actually targeted contacts and not random contacts that the ham radio community is kind of known for. Been working on finally my portable man packs. I started out a couple years ago doing summits on the air, and I was trying to find a good way of having an all-in-one radio kit that included the power, the antenna system, offered some protection. So after about 18 months of running around the Sonoran Desert, finally released a product in a very limited release called the TTP Man Pack, and it's working out pretty well. The handful of people that do have them are enjoying them. And then the last big thing that I've been working on, actually been working on for 2 years, is a software project that's not out yet called mcom Tools, which is my attempt of putting together a off-grid, offline communications platform to really make amateur radio super easy. So those are the big 3 buckets. We can dive into those a little bit deeper if you guys want, but it's keeping me busy besides the day job.
Absolutely. Okay, then. And so let's get into this. Now, Gaston, you have been a ham for probably about 20 years, but it's really only the past 2 or 3 where you've really started to get into the hobby. Is that right?
No, so I actually was licensed in 2017.
Okay.
Tried to get on the air for about 2 years, half-heartedly tried. I just had a Baofeng UV5R, wasn't getting any luck. And it wasn't until 3 years ago that we moved out to a property out in the country in Arizona, and I made my first actual contact. So really I've only been on the air for just under 3 years. So very new ham.
Very new ham, remarkable success. And what I'm fascinated by, so you know, I'm a camper and not a glamper. So I've got, you know, every winter comes along and I binge on YouTube bushcraft stuff and, you know, backwoods and survival skills and all the rest of it. And I'm fascinated, you know, I'm familiar with the prepping world, and it's its own real community.
Yeah.
And you've got the, you know, the ham radio world. These are 2 disparate entities, but you've managed to find a bridge between the 2 of them. And I think this is really tapping into something, and the growth in your channel, the quality of your videos, the subject material that you're raising has really drawn people to it. Now, can you tell me a little bit, you know, I know there's ham radio operators out there, and when they think of preppers, I know that a certain number of them are thinking of Johnny sitting on his porch with his shotgun across his lap, prepared to fight anybody that comes onto his land.
Right.
That's not prepping. That's not prepping at all, is it? Can
No.
you talk to me about your take on prepping, how you got into that,
Yeah.
and then how you see it melding with amateur radio?
Right. Yeah. So I got into it about 8 or 9 years ago when I was working for a biotech company in the San Diego area in California. And it was about an hour before quitting time. And there was some type of inclement weather that knocked out all the power in the area. And San Diego is not known for an area that really has inclement weather come in that impacts anything. And the entire county basically shut down. We walked outside of the campus and all 4 intersections were fully gridlocked. We looked over at the gas station. There was a line of like 30 or 40 cars stranded. Nobody could pump. Cell phones weren't working. And they had like a little place called the Island. It was like a food court. They went basically to generators and a cash system selling whole pizzas for $50. Even guys were out on the street selling bottles of the 12.5-ounce bottles of like Arrowhead for $10 a pop. And this all happened in about 20 minutes. And everybody just went crazy. And I was about 20 miles from home wearing leather dress shoes, slacks. And I'm like, wow, I don't even have cash. I have no way of walking home in these. I have no way of talking to my wife. And that's what got me thinking about, what do I do? So I looked first, since I'm a software engineer by trade, looked at it more as an engineering problem and how to prioritize things. So very practical preparation, saying, how do I solve this particular problem? And that led to this idea that's been around in the prepper community of get home bags. So I built a bag that at the very minimum started with a good pair of walking shoes, good pair of socks, some layers for the elements, ability to have some water. And it really just evolved from, okay, we've solved the car kit, get home bag problem. What's the next likely scenario? Well, it could be an 8-hour outage. So kind of working around the preps of what we would do if we had to power out for 8 hours. And then it turned into a 72-hour set of planning, 3 weeks. And now we're well beyond 3 months, but it's really looking at what types of situations are most likely going to impact you and where you get the most value. And kind of where I ended up, where I differ from the preppers, is that I challenged myself about a year ago. And I'm in pretty good shape. I do trail running every day. I go hiking with a fairly heavy ruck for summits on the air. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go and do a full loadout this weekend. And I'm going to climb the mountain I do for SOTA. So I got my full rucksack with my radio, 8 liters of water. That's what we need here in the Sonoran Desert for about a day. But brought a plate carrier, put 3 magazines on, carried a full-size pistol, carried a rifle. And I will tell you, by the end of that day, I was completely wiped. And I was someone who was in his late 30s, very well conditioned. And I got back to the house and said, you know what? I'm not prepared to get into a firefight. I'm not prepared to go out and survive in the wilderness. And reality is I have a wife at home. She's not going to be able to do 1/20th of that. So I started to reevaluate this idea of community. And right now I'm actually working more on how to build local support communities as really being the number one prep, and getting to know your neighbors and helping them with communication. And it's actually working pretty well. So right now we're actually even bartering for different skills. So I'm trading radio work now for, I needed some rocks moved out of the way so we could drill a new well. I trade computer work for the gal down the street that helped me assemble my first set of man-pack bags for her sewing work. So this idea of just coming together as a community is really what I look at now in terms of being prepared and not being an island unto yourself.
Great idea.
Now, as far as the if you standing on the prepper side of the fence, and you're talking to a bunch of people there that have genuine concern about when, if and when things go bad, how do they handle things? And you got people who are looking at CB radio as communication alternates, and GMRS, ham radio. How do you sell ham radio to the people who might be looking at the other avenues of communication?
Well, so this was part of something I touched on my No Random Contact series. And the analogy I came up with, what are your communication goals? Because that's going to dictate which radio service is best for you. Because not every radio service will do everything you need for your personal communication. So I came up with these, I don't know if it was 8 or 9 concentric rings of communication, starting with kind of your community, like your neighborhood. And for that one, I said, you know what? MERS radio and FRS are probably pretty good. We did some range tests around the neighborhood. Nobody needed to be licensed. Everybody within that local network had the appropriate equipment. And then beyond that, it was, well, what do you do at maybe the city level or your county? And that's when you start to get into VHF, UHF. GMRS is a great way to utilize a service that doesn't really require you to take a test. You could pay for a license. Covers you probably for about like that 30 to 40 mile range with the repeaters. Covers your family. But then you start to get, what do you do beyond that? And that's where amateur radio comes into my mind. So a lot of the work that I've been doing lately is in terms of what I'm looking for in my support network. I want to be able to talk to people in my city or in my community, in my city, in my county, in the state, and in my region. And amateur radio, in my mind, is the only way to cover all those bases. So I had been spending most of my time trying to do targeted contacts with known operators using NVIS. So for me, I think the sweet spot, if you're a prepper, at least here in the US, is to work your way to through your technician class license, get your general, understand how HF and propagation works, but really start to look at HF and NVIS to get you into that 0 to 300 mile range of truly no infrastructure required to make your communication. So there's no free lunches is the way that I see the conversation you need to have with the prepper community. I believe that unlike a lot of preppers, you do have to get your license so you can train, because this stuff is not easy. I mean, I have been struggling to figure out how to make contacts on low power across the state. And I'm doing it now with the right antenna, right time of day, as I learn more about propagation. But it's not the kind of thing where you can just flip a switch on and you're going to be able to talk to someone 200 miles away very first time just because you both own equipment. So I think training is key, and having the right expectation of who you want to talk to, where they're located, and picking the correct radio service.
Excellent. I just want to jump in there.
Yep.
So some of the work that you've done, like with when you carried up that big pack up to the summit, it was like, yeah, you were carrying a lot of gear up there, and it was like you had like that moment of, okay, I gotta lighten this load up.
Yeah.
So which I think that's wise, because I think a lot of us, I know me. I mean, I have my pack here, and I bring out my POTA stuff, and I know I'm carrying way more than I need to carry. That I know. I kind of go under the assumption of, I'll carry extra adapters. I'll carry extra this, extra that, just in case, oh, that broke. I need one of these. That's yet to happen, but it's always good to have like the extra stuff. And we were talking before we started the stream about like taking 2 radios with you if you go somewhere. And then Tracy did the same thing on that one outing you did on the lake where you luckily had another radio with you. So, stuff like that, I think is things we really need to think about also, which I know you have.
Well, I did. So there was a video I did, I don't know, maybe a month and a half ago, 2 months ago in October. And my uncle passed away earlier in the year, and he was an avid backpacker. He has been taking me out since I was 7 years old. And his wish when he passed was for us to go scatter his ashes. So I hope nobody from the Park Service is watching. But so it's the highest peak in the continental U.S. at 14,505 feet. So he asked my cousin and I, who both did that peak together when we were 8 and 10, and we did it when we were now 41 and 43. And I had the plan of bringing my rucksack with my Yaesu FT818s, with I scaled it down to a 3 amp hour battery, my HF antennas, an HT, and we did a training hike on the way there where we did 4,000 feet of gain at Mount San Antonio. And I'm like, nope, I got to drop this gear. There's no way I'm going to be able to do 11 miles and 6,500 feet of gain with a 39-pound pack.
Yep.
And it turns out we had a diabetic emergency on that trip.
Wow.
And all I had with me was my Yaesu VX6 HT. And the only place where we had line of sight was on Summit the previous day. And we had to actually call for an evac. Wow. And no cell phones worked. And the gentleman who was having the diabetic emergency had a Garmin InReach. And the day before, when we knew he was going critical, I said, hey, can you show us how to use your Garmin InReach Mini? Because we're not familiar with this device. He's like, no, it's not going to be a problem. I just need a good night's rest. He gave us a 2-minute overview. So the next morning, when he was basically, when we realized we had to call it, I did a rock scramble up about 500 feet, had line of sight with the HT into Whitney Portal, opened up the repeater, and nobody was listening. Oh. So even with the right amateur radio gear, even knowing how to program the repeater on the fly, no one was there. So I came back down. They were able to send an SOS beacon. There was a 3-minute delay in their signal going out, 3 minutes to get back from Inyo County Search and Rescue. Long story short, U.S. Navy finally came in, Hilo came in, did an evac at 12,500. Wow. So it's picking the right tool for the job. So out of that experience, one, I learned a whole bunch about type 1 diabetics and how to add some more medical preparedness to my kit. But I bought a Garmin InReach Mini as a licensed amateur radio. There's times where you can't bring even a 2.5-pound HF rig And even then, you might not have
Reach
be able to
somebody.
make the contact. So the satellite device actually did save the day.
So someone, to your point, someone has to be at the other end. You could have
Yeah.
the rig, but yeah. I think the biggest help of certainly of reducing the bulk that we're carrying, not that it makes it easier like climbing summits like you are, but even like going out to a park or just throwing it in your car, whatever you're doing, like the lighter it is, then it's mentally you're going to be thinking like, okay, before you go out, you might be thinking, oh, I should bring the radios. Oh, I got this big, forget it. I'll take it next time, right?
Yeah.
But it's better to go lighter. So, yeah.
Well, there's also the support gear too. I mean, every ounce of equipment you bring competes with some other equipment, whether it's like a sleep system or water, food, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, those ounces do add up over time. And I think I saw Charlie pop in somewhere, Red Summit RF.
Absolutely did.
Yeah. So hey, Charlie. Yeah, him and I have had a couple of adventures, and him and I got ourselves into a bad situation on another peak. And radio actually did save the day that day to coordinate a pickup. And
Do you want to tell a story?
Yeah. So we Charlie wanted to do a peak out by me called Elephant Butte, and it was a peak that defeated me the year before.
Sorry, Gaston. I just want to interrupt. For those that may not be aware, Charlie has a fantastic YouTube channel called Red Summit RF, and he's all about summits on the air, outdoor operation, great channel, wonderful content. Make sure you check it out. Please go ahead, Gaston.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Charlie's a good guy. So yeah, Charlie and I decided to take out another amateur radio operator who was very newly licensed, and he said, yeah, I'd love to do a peak with you as a local. We arrived at the trailhead about 5:30. We wanted to make sure that we were able to beat the summer heat. And we knew that we had to be, I think, on summit by 10 a.m., give us about 2 hours to activate, and then get off the peak by noon. Well, the other gentleman in our party was going a bit slower than we were used to. And we reached the point right before we had a really difficult ascent with a lot of exposure where he's like, I don't think I can do it. And, you know, the hike back for him wasn't going to be too bad. It was trafficked enough. So we made a call as a group saying, hey, let's let him go off on his own back to the trailhead. And we synced up all of our HTs and just decided to have a combo plan where we would check in at the top of every hour with each other or every half hour. So we kept track of David as he was making his way down. We knew he was safe. Charlie and I had one heck of a time traversing this peak. It was what they called a primitive trail, and it had a lot of exposure. And by the time we got up there, it was much later than we wanted. We did our activation. It was getting later in the day, and we realized there was no way in heck we can come back the way we came. So I'm like, Charlie, I know where we are roughly. Let's look at the topos and let's go completely in the opposite direction. We'll raise David on the HT and we'll have him rendezvous and pick us up about 4.5 miles due east of us. And we did the trek out, and literally as soon as we got to that point of egress, our buddy David was there with water and grapes, and that was an example of kind of that we had to split up. We had a communications plan, and we were able to use the minimal tech privileges to keep everybody in contact over the course of 8-10 hours of backpacking that day.
Wow,
fantastic preparation, and having a plan in a situation like that is everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't make it up when you're out there. I mean, the job just gets 10 times harder if you do. Okay. Gaston, will you please talk to us a little bit about your Man Pack bag, which is just fantastic. This is an awesome product.
Yeah, so it's not available publicly yet. I did a limited release to see if I could even do it. But where this started was when I did Summits in the Air 2 years ago, I was carrying my 818 in a dry bag, a 3-liter dry bag. I had a separate dry bag for my LifePo battery, the hand mic, the antenna system, a whole bunch of components. So when I would get up to a peak, I would deploy my tarp shelter, throw up my carbon fiber mask, my NFED half wave, had a small 1-pound aluminum table, and then I would break out all the dry bags, connect the radio, and finally I was on the air 20 minutes later. So I had a gentleman out in Tennessee who has a company called Armorlock, and he built these aluminum frames, and they provide protection to the radio all the way down past the connectors on the back end, so power and your coax, but also for the knobs and the head unit. And he was prior service, and his vision was to always run it in a bag, like a man pack. So I went on a mission after he sent me a pair to find the appropriate bag. So I started out with a DSLR camera bag because it was the right size for it. And it was kind of awkward and weird dimension. Later on, I found a couple of other bags that were commercially available, and I kind of pieced them together, but the flaps wouldn't cover it. The cables were on the outside. It was missing a bunch of features I really wanted. Didn't have any way to vent it or cool it. So going back to community, the neighbor down the street that does sewing work, I took her, like my bags, and had her modify it. Like, can we cut this flap off and put this strap here and put these holes here? She did it, and it was a rough prototype. And then finally, I was fortunate about 3 months ago where I connected with someone who just retired from the firearm bag industry. And he's like, I'll do bags. I will design the bag you want. So I gave him all my sketches and everything, and we basically came up with that little bag there.
Nice.
So I could walk you through some of the features. I think you've got a few slides here.
Absolutely.
So yeah, this first feature here, this is running the 818 with the TPA Armorlock pack frames. And the top flap actually is designed to close and fully cover it. And then if you go on to the next slide, you can kind of see the attention to detail since I bang around my equipment pretty heavily. Everything here is 1,000 denier Cordura. We have HK clips, welded D-rings, but even like the reinforced strap that goes full length around were things that I just wanted because I only want to have one lifetime bag. So I designed this as the bag that I wanted, where all I literally have to do is drop this in my pack, flip open the lid, drop on the antenna, and be operating in less than 30 seconds. HF takes a little bit of more work, but that's due to the antenna, not so much the bag itself.
Hey, Gaston, you mentioned 1000D, and that's pretty good stuff. That'll keep a light rain out of the gear, won't it? It can get a little bit wet with that kind of material.
It can. I haven't really tested it too much in the rain, mostly because we just have a rainy July monsoon season and pretty dry the rest of the year. But I was concerned about the rain. So at the end, I'll probably walk you through the a rain cover I also designed for it just in case.
Nice.
So this is one other thing that I was missing. I also wanted to have like an admin pouch. So when I do summits on the air, I have these doping cards that are lots of 3x5 laminated cards. I have a Write in the Rain notebook, Write in the Rain pen, and then I really love these little Comet BNC24 whip antennas. So I wanted enough room in the bag to accommodate, at least for me, all of those components. So that's just a shot of the little bit of admin room you have built into the front pouch there.
Would you mind explaining those laminated cards? What information is on those?
So I have about a dozen. I think I'm going to actually probably put those out online. I think I did it about 2 years ago and they need an update. But so I have all of the local repeaters with the offsets, the PL tones in the area that I'm going to be in, just in case my radio's not programmed or my phone's not working and I can't get access to repeater book. Right. I also have all of the local contacts that I've made in the area. So I have first names, last name, and call signs. And it really helped a lot when I was getting into summits on the air, as I was getting to know all the players. There's also an APRS cheat sheet. I do APRS quite a bit with the MobiLink TNC. And I like to send SMS text messages to my wife. Occasionally I'll do emails. And more than anything, I will spot myself on a summit, even look up weather. And each of those have a different message format. And I just didn't want to have to remember what format was required for each one. So they were just real simple reference cards to kind of aid with these basic operations. Oh, and also a very minimal portion of the general HF bands. So what are my start and end portions for digital and voice? just so I'm compliant when I'm on the air, where I don't tune past 14.350 megahertz or wherever
Don't feel bad. I still have to do that every once in a while. I mean, I'll hop on 30 meters and be like, okay, wait, how low can I go? And you have to look it up, and and I've been doing this for years, so don't feel bad.
Well, I don't. The funny thing is, this is a shameless plug, but I started putting Amazon affiliate links in my videos almost as soon as they started the channel, and people were asking me like, "What laminator do you use?" And it's a $20 laminator. I think it's a Epson laminator. And that thing is the biggest money maker. I must sell at least 20 laminators every single month on Amazon, plus the consumables.
Fantastic. Hey, Gaston, there's a question for you here.
Yeah. Oh, do you use portable solar cells? I do. We live in the Sonoran Desert, and we have more than enough sun. So I started out with the PowerFilm 20-watt folding panels. They are very expensive based on the number of watts. And with that panel paired with the Buddy Pole Power Mini, charging my LiFePo using a 6-watt radio, I was able to produce about 1 amp every hour. And my Yaesu, that's about the power consumption I use on the Yaesu per hour between receive and transmit when I'm out in the field. And I actually found that I could do a whole lot less. Lately, I actually moved to the 10-watt model, and I get about 500 milliwatts. And with the Yaesu radio being on receive at about 390 milliamps, it's actually pretty good to keep me going for an 8-hour day. So I am fairly light in terms of the solar panels I use, but a lot of it has to do with the fact that when I go into the field, I deploy a lean-to shelter with a USGI poncho and a trekking pole, and I always pitch it facing the sun. And I basically have, like I said, ample sun here. So I pretty much get close to 100% of the rated output on either of those panels. So not something I think most people could do in most parts of the country, but we're fortunate.
What do the power films go for these days?
They're very expensive. I think for the 20, I must have spent over $300, maybe $350. And for the 10-watt one, to save weight, I want to say it was probably in the $200 range. Wow. But again, especially that 10-watt one, it's tiny. It looks like an oversized remote control when it's folded. And again, I run QRP, so for me, it's not a huge deal. And I don't transmit for very long. I actually listen more than I transmit while I'm out there.
Yeah, very cool. Hey, by the way, just a quick shout out to Mike, Kilo 8, Mike Radio Delta. If you haven't seen Mike's channel, radio K8MRD radio stuff, you got to go check it out. He does a lot of great stuff. Thanks for tuning in, Mike. I've got another question here. This time it's from Charlie.
Yes. So Charlie wants to know if I can talk about 2-meter single sideband. So people always ask me why I love these all band, all mode rigs. And those are basically the shack in the box. So for me, it's the 817, 818, 857, and they cover you from HF, VHF, 6 meters, HF, and they'll do all mode. So typically when you look at VHF and UHF in particular, most people are working with rigs that only do FM. I have actually found that we have a really rich single sideband community here on 2 meters. And my ability to have a signal go out further with less power is just amazing in my experience compared to FM. So I regularly make contacts anywhere from 2.5 to 5 watts, well over 100 miles with a rig. And I'm using upper sideband on 2 meters. And I primarily bring 2 antennas. The first one, I gave one to Charlie. He was the one who asked this question, a Red Summit RF. And Pactena came out with a little PCB called the Pactena Truck Mount. And what it is, it's a little printed circuit board that has a little hole, and it has 4 B and C connectors. One's on the bottom for your feed line, 2 come out of the side, so you can run 2 antennas that you bring, like your HT antennas, and run it as a horizontal dipole. and that's what we use for single sideband. It also has an optional BNC on top, so you could have do a vertical with the ground plane. And those BNC 24 antennas that I showed earlier, with this particular Pactena truck mount, when it's horizontal, has pretty much a perfect one-to-one match. And I basically orient that like the wings out at the bearing of the station I want to talk to. And it is just an unbelievable ultralight. I mean, the whole antenna system is just a handful of ounces. I even run it with extremely high loss RG316 on VHF, which is a big no-no. But I have incredible results. So I took out Charlie, that peak I was telling you about where we separated from our group. Him and I were both playing with single sideband on 2 meters. So that's a great question. Underutilized mode, in my opinion, and not all radios do it these days, but great performer.
Yeah, there's a comment here, Douglas V. Any new production radios that have 2 meters? I mean, I'm thinking the 991A, which really isn't a portable man-pack radio, and the 7100, whose form factor doesn't really allow for it because you got this 2-piece awkward design that doesn't lend itself. Now, I know that there are people that have put these into backpacks. I'm thinking of Joseph VE3 GKT. So he's from our area up here, and he has done amazing things in POTA. And he literally built a wooden frame that goes into a backpack. I mean, you're not going to take that up a summit.
Well, the 705 is also all band, all mode.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. The 705 would do it.
Yeah, it's an amazing mode. And if it wasn't for us having a rich single sideband community, I probably wouldn't be as hot on those all band, all mode radios. But we have nets here twice a week with 30 people on them, and I really, really enjoy them.
You know, I haven't explored 2-meter sideband around here in Connecticut. I haven't tried that. But no, now we're talking about it, it might be something I might take the 817 out and just throw an antenna out there, just listen around on it, see what's out there. Yeah,
and my favorite antenna, like I said, I use the truck mount when I go hiking. Arrow makes a beautiful antenna. They've got a 4-element 2-meter antenna. It's called the backpacker model. And they have 2 portions where the boom will either break into 2 pieces or 3. And I can actually orient that beam at the location. So the software project I was telling you guys earlier, one of the original features I wanted for that was the ability to have an offline FCC call database with all the licensed hams. I took that database, since I'm a search engineer, that's what I do for my day job, and I geocoded everybody's representative location. So I took their zip code and applied geo coordinates to it. So when I'm in the field, my software also has GPS, and what it would do is I would look up someone's call sign, and it'd be like, November Juliet 7 Victor, he's 22 miles point to point, and he's at a bearing of 63 degrees. And my software would tell me that, and I would take the Yagi and my watch and basically orient it and just get a beautiful signal, receive and transmit. So that Arrow 2 Yagi is an absolute beast in terms of its packability, portability. In fact, I use that on a painter's pole on the side of my house. And literally, we'll do the same thing at home for our nets and walk outside whenever the rotation goes to the next operator in the net and look them up and orient the beam at their direction.
That's
so
cool.
Don't need to spend a whole lot of money to be able to be effective on sideband, in my opinion.
That's great.
Gaston, we are coming up to 1:45, and we've just had a question, and I don't know if we want to fast track through the man pack. We do have a question from Michael. He wants to hear you talk a bit about mcom tools.
Yeah, let's go there.
Do we want to just head straight over there and do some talking on that one?
Yeah, I don't want to push my gear on people. It'll be there next year.
Sure. Okay.
All right, very good.
Tell us about.
Yeah, so again, I'm very late newcomer to the hobby. I've only been on the air for 3 years, and one of the things that I wanted to do for off-grid communication was get into digital modes, and I had a hard time. I had a real hard time trying to figure out what I needed to buy in terms of like the signal link, how to connect that to my radio, how to configure the software. And I'm a software engineer. And once I figured out how to do it for FT8, it was a hurdle of like, okay, now how do I do that on packet for WinLink? And how do I do this mode for APRS? And every mode had its own quirks and nuances. Every software behaved a little bit differently. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way. So the mcom tools platform, I built it in such a way where I wanted it to be an off-grid, offline communication tool that could give you a bunch of different tools, right down to digital data modes. And right now where it's at is it has offline mapping capabilities. So you can basically go to a section, see a map, do offline FCC call lookups, get the bearing of the station you want to talk to. It has some calculator tools, so you can do some propagation analysis. Some of that stuff is online, but it makes it really easy within the tool. It also hides the complexities of doing things like APRS and hides the complexity of doing messaging. So for example, in mcom tools, there's an interface where I'll click a button and it will reprogram the radio to basically go into 2-meter simplex on 144.390. Behind the scenes, it fires up an APRS client called YAC. Operator doesn't see any of this happening. And all there is a 2-field of what phone number do I want to send a text message to and what's the message. And literally within about 20 seconds of connecting the radio to the laptop and going to that screen, I can send a text message to my wife saying, on Summit, safe. I don't have to worry about the startup, shutdown process. The software hides all that. Same thing, if I want to send an email now to somebody else to say, hey, I'm on peak, let's coordinate on this frequency. It shuts down that mode of operation, reprograms the radio, and basically gives me just an entry to enter in the email and send it. I don't have to worry about anything else. And then
that is awesome. That is absolutely awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And this morning, I shared it this morning on Buy Me a Coffee. Now that I have the cat control working with this platform, now that I have offline maps, again, using my search background, I geocoded every single repeater that was in repeater book. And that's all stored locally on the as a data set on the laptop. So I can click on my pin and hit find repeaters. It finds all the repeaters within 20 miles of me. If I move to another location, I can do the same thing. It'll find, again, the next nearest 20 repeaters. And the cool thing is all I have to do is click on it and it reprograms the radio on the fly with the frequency, the offset, and the tone. And I'm making the point that I know how to program my repeaters by hand. That's one thing I learned very early on, but it's a convenience tool. Yes. So the platform is turning into this thing that is much larger than that simple bearing calculator tool I made 2 years ago to this thing that does WinLink emails, APRS messaging with all the gateways, mapping. It even does keyboard to keyboard chat between stations that we're testing out for public service events. And we don't even have to worry about, FL Digi or whatever. It puts the right modem. And as far as you can tell, it looks like we're using Slack between the two stations that are talking. So it's my way of simplifying amateur radio. There is one gotcha. To do this, I can't accommodate every radio and I can't accommodate every platform. So at least for the initial version, I've really landed on the Panasonic CF20 Toughbook because I know all the hardware works. I know how it works with the GPS, and I know how it interfaces with my 4 radios. So the 818 or 817, the FT857, 897, and now the Zygu X6100. But I got to the point now where it literally is you take your cable, plug it in, and it detects which radio is connected. You unplug it, it removes it from the system. I plug in the 6100, and it reconfigures everything. It actually goes and does a full system takeover. Like it really does detect the sound card. It detects the serial device. It spins up the correct version of rig control with the correct baud rate. So it's a very ambitious platform, but the idea is to tell people in prepper community groups, go out and buy this radio, get yourself an 818. Go out and get yourself a CF20 and go ahead and get this little USB thumb drive that has mcom tools, never goes online, and basically it's plug and play. So it's a very ambitious goal, and something that is taking basically up my mornings before work every single morning for the last few months. And I hope to have the release out sometime next year.
So when I'm listening to this, what I'm thinking of, and I'm sure, I'm just putting it in my own words, Gaston. I think this is the way, when back in the 90s, I used to sell Apple computers, Mac computers,
Yep.
right? And that was in the days of DOS. Windows was just sort of coming on. And Steve Jobs' original vision of the Mac was the computer as an appliance.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's like it was stupid simple. Now it's completely devolved since then, in my estimation. I'm a Mac user, have been for years, and people who love Macs now have no idea what the platform used to be and how simple it was.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing with this right here, picture a situation, and I am, somebody's hurt or lives are in peril. You're not thinking clearly. You've got to reach out and communicate with somebody. This sounds like a system that would be up to that task to be able to, somebody can do something when they're completely unfocused, and get a signal out there.
Right. And you nailed it on the head. I got a lot of criticism last week or a couple of weeks ago. I used the same Steve Jobs analogy. I said, you know what? Who's ever had an iPhone in their hand, who has read the manual? It doesn't come with a manual. Everybody knows how to use it. And that's where I was going with this, is just the ability of my litmus test and success criteria is to give it to my wife, who's a non-ham. I plan to write no more than a 10-page waterproof, spiral-bound field notebook and say, take the system, where she's going to actually set up the antenna, the broadbanded antenna, take the man pack, connect it to the laptop, and boot it up. And I'm going to have her go through the exercise with my call to go through a couple of different scenarios.
Great.
And if she can do it, then I think I've succeeded.
That's a great test. Yeah,
And,
Tracy, I agree with you. It's the same idea. It's taking that the system's closed. It doesn't need to be open, right? It's closed.
Yeah.
Everything you need is on that thumb drive. You get yourself set up, and it does everything for you. So it's like you don't have to. Oh, do I have the right driver? Do I have this? Do I have that? Don't think about that. You just plug and play. Truly plug and play. Now, is there a chance of getting it onto into an app so it would run like on a tablet?
So that's why I like the CF20. It's a detachable tablet too, and it's basically a weather-resistant 10.1-inch 2.1 tablet. The problem with doing this like in the Android ecosystem is that I'm not a well-versed enough software engineer to do the DSP audio programming. So I'd have to design a modem and do all these things. I've actually cheated a little bit. I've started with Linux. I have taken other software. So I'm basically using Direwolf under the hood as my packet engine. But I've done the heavy lifting of doing all the pre-configuration things with known hardware. I've also modified Yak. So you actually use Yak, but without Yak's interface, the APRS client. You actually use my more simplified interface. And I've been able to make so much progress because I'm building on software that has been written before me. If I had to go and write all these different pieces, it would be a problem. So
Sure.
I'm more of an integrator. I'm basically gluing everything together, making sure it all works together, leveraging that fantastic work, whether it's FL Digi or Direwolf, Yak, Pat WinLink, and putting a nice, clean interface on top that
exactly.
uses it.
The CF20, I think, it's an older laptop, isn't it? I mean, you can be able to work Windows 11 and further stuff, or doesn't even come into play.
So mine is, I actually dual boot all mine. So I actually run mcom tools in a partition that takes about 90% of the space, and then I leave 10% for Windows. And the only reason I have Windows is for things like running the CPS software for my Motorola radios that are Windows only. But in general, I'm just running it all on this heavily customized version of
Is
Linux.
the good old Yaesu SCU17 in that database too, as far as equipment? Because
No.
I use the SCU17 for my digital stuff, and I have a DigiKey, but I've already set up the Yaesu version, and it was not a pleasant task to get that to communicate with all the other software that I've got too. I think
Yeah,
Tracy, you
no.
got one too, right? Don't you
Sorry?
use the SCU, Tracy? The SCU17?
I have one. I'm going to have to call on you, Tim, to get it all going. I haven't
See?
set it up.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a good afternoon wasted getting that thing to talk to
Yeah.
FD8 and do all the other stuff with it, and it was just like, wow, this is hard. So
Yeah, no,
Hey,
just
Gaston.
the DigiRig is the only one I'm supporting with those radios, and it's because I want it to be that communications tool for emergencies. The second I say every radio is going to be opened up, every interface like a Rig Blaster or a Signal Link, I introduce more time to development, more time supporting the integration, more instability.
There's more weak points too. I mean,
Yeah, it's like the blue screen of death from Windows, right? That's the last thing I want. So I'm happy to share this with anybody who wants it that shares this common hardware. But really, the goal is simple at all levels, simple integrations. And at the end of the day, the DigiRig, it's like $40 or something, and a pretty nice interface to use as kind of the standard digital gateway.
I couldn't get it to work with my tablet. I've got a little tablet that I had this dream of being able to just do, some minimal digital communication and stuff with the tablet, and I could not. I couldn't get it to work with the tablet. I mean, it's a neat little piece of equipment. I've got one, but I'd like to see something that I can, do some handheld stuff with too. Because I've got a little Dell laptop that I bought refurbished on Amazon or something like that, and that's kind of my portable outfit when I want to do digital. I didn't mess with the Panasonics. They're cool.
They're cool, and they can be had right now. They're a little bit older and sluggish, but that's the direction we're going. I do want to answer a question from Luis Sanchez. Gaston, what is your favorite digital mode for HF and why? I am really enjoying the NBMS software suite. That is the narrowband emergency messaging software, and that includes FL Digi, FL Message, FL or FLAMP, and FL Wrap. And the reason for it is that it is a Swiss Army knife of modems. For the public service work I do, we have a set of modems that work very well on VHF, UHF, MT63 2KL, 8PSK 1000, and then on HF, we're using MFSK 32, Contestia, and I'm having good luck with NVIS, my NVIS deployed antennas, making keyboard chats with people in the Southwest very reliably, 40 meters during the late afternoons and 80 in the morning. And it's a little bit older technology, but in my mind, I like the FL Message for the formatted message types. In fact, mcom tools, all of the chat features, all of the position sharing uses FL Message and FL Digi under the hood. The user doesn't see it, and that's how I actually exchange it. So I can actually pick the best modem for the best mode of operation. So yeah, NBMS is my favorite HF tool these days on digital. Pedro says, so is it Linux based? Yeah, it's based on Ubuntu Linux. Right now, the best support I have is on Ubuntu 22.10, which is not an LTS release, but touchscreen and all the device drivers work. So that's the other reason why I'm opting to package a customized version here, is that you could install this on the same laptop 5 years from now. Since it never needs to go online, it's all going to continue to work. So if I do plan to do updates, it'd probably be no more than once a year. So the next version of mcom tools will probably be in 2024, so that I can guarantee I can do an OS upgrade all the pieces, and then that will also be good for all the hardware that's around at that time.
Have you thought about a price at all?
No, because I'm still trying to figure out things like how to do custom USB thumb drives. I've got a few vendors that I'm looking at for the Altoids tins, and then also printing the manuals. Like I said, this vision is not so much about the software. It's more about the vision of an all-in-one platform that's easy to use. That again, I could pull out like my 2005 MacBook. My wife and I pulled it out the other day to pull off some old photos, and it still works. It's very much locked in that period in time. And I look at mcom tools being, okay, if you guys buy a CF20 today and run mcom tools, you could likely use this for 20 years if all the hardware continues to run, because it doesn't need an upgrade. All of these digital modes, physics is not going to change in 20 years. So you can still run the old modems, in 2042.
Hey, Gaston, question
They'll
for
be
you
more
here.
secure then too.
What's that?
They'll be more secure then too.
Correct. Yeah, it's air gapped. You never need to go online. Quartz Fest, yes. I actually took a week off work. I'm bringing the RV. I will be doing demos of mcom tools. So there's a question from, was it K6SUD? I think he follows me on Instagram. So if you guys are in Arizona, I plan there to at least be the first 3 days of Quartz Fest with the RV, and be running a bunch of different scenarios out in the field. So say hello.
Well, we are at the 1 hour mark, and it's been a great hour. It has been really fantastic. Lots of interaction with the viewers. Gaston, the stuff you're doing is incredible. You're innovative on the hardware side, and you're innovative on the software side, and that's no mean feat. You see a lot of people copying what other people are doing, and then you see somebody like yourself who's truly innovating. It's amazing. So thanks very much. Do you have any final words for us as we wrap this up?
No, I just want to thank everybody for joining the stream. I know we kind of announced it a little bit late, but I appreciate all the support. I try to put out a YouTube video every Saturday or Sunday morning. It's been a little bit tougher, especially with the bags and the software. Don't want to plug Buy Me a Coffee, but the reality is I'm trying to exit my day job, and I would love to just focus 12 hours a day just working on this software, but that requires that I still feed the wife and keep the lights on. So yeah, buymeacoffee.com/thetechprepper. I do put content when I can out there that's special, commercial free for those guys. Those are actually the group of people that get first right of refusal for the bags. So that group got the first 50 signed numbered man packs. That's going to be the first group that gets into the beta program for this. And that's only because I'm a realist, and I'd love to have all of this be for free, but I really want to do this as a full-time gig and need everybody's support.
I bought him a coffee. I bought him a coffee.
Thanks, Tim.
Coffee.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Hey, Chris, any parting shots from yourself?
Yeah, actually, we were, before we went on, I was as I always do when we do these things and we have a special guest, I always wind up gushing about their channel. And I have to show, if anyone's seen my little VHF UHF pack, this whole project was inspired from watching Gaston's channel. And this was awesome. I mean, there's so much that you're involved in, and it's to Tracy's point. You're doing hardware, you're doing software, you're taking radio to a new level, and I think anyone watching should support you and buy you as much coffee as you need.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm all out here. I might need to do a cup for our after chat.
Hey, Tim, what you got anything to say on the way out?
Well, I like I said, I bought him a coffee, so I'm eagerly awaiting the mcom tools. I want to try. I want that. I don't really want things too much, but this I want.
Very good. We'll get you one.
Yes, indeed.
Very cool. Very cool.
And
well, thank you.
You made Tracy the happiest dude in the world by clipping on that 1 hour mark. Let me tell you. He's a devil about that stuff. Yeah, 1 hour.
You know what? The whole idea is let's keep the content to the point. Let's get people in and out. Let's not make people sort of tail off because
my point was that he made you happy, and it's good to see you happy.
Right. Tracy's not a sad ham.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Tim, is there more?
No, there isn't. Good night.
All right. Good stuff. Well, thanks very much to everybody who attended the live stream. We all really appreciate it. Thanks very much to Gaston. Gaston, you've been an amazing guest, truly a ham hero, and it's been fantastic having you with us.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah,
doing great.
So
work.
with that, with that, everybody, 7-3, and we'll catch you down the road.
Up 73, everyone.